If you had invested just $10,000 in the year 2000, you'd have very different results depending on where you put it. In real estate, that $10,000 would have grown to roughly $48,000 by 2024. But in the S&P 500, that same $10,000 would be worth over $76,000. That's a difference of $28,000 from the exact same starting amount over the exact same time period. So why do most Americans still believe real estate is the best way to build wealth? That's exactly what we're breaking down today. Because the real answer is way more complicated than either side wants to admit. Hey, I'm Joe, and this is Joe Invests. On this channel, we take the most important money questions, strip away all the jargon and the noise, and figure out what actually works for regular people trying to build real wealth. If that sounds like your kind of thing, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now let's get into the great wealth building debate, real estate versus stocks. So let's start with the actual data, because this argument has been going on for decades, and most people are just going off vibes. A landmark study from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, published in 2017 by researchers Jordà, Katerina Knoll, Dmitry Kuvshinov, Moritz Schularick, and Alan Taylor, analyzed returns across 16 advanced economies from 1870 to 2015. The study is called The Rate of Return on Everything, and it's one of the most comprehensive analyses of asset returns ever conducted. Here's what they found. Residential real estate returned an average of 7.05% per year, while equities returned an average of 6.89% per year. That surprised a lot of people because real estate actually slightly outperformed stocks over that 145-year window. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Those real estate returns include rental income, not just price appreciation. If you only look at home price appreciation without rental income, the numbers drop dramatically. According to Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist from Yale who literally created the Case-Shiller home price index, U.S. home prices have only appreciated at about 3.4% per year after inflation since 1890. 3.4%. That barely keeps pace with inflation in many decades. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 has delivered roughly 10% annually before inflation, or about 7% after inflation. Going back to 1926, according to data from Ibbotson Associates and Morningstar. Now let's make this real with a specific example. The median U.S. home price in the year 2000 was roughly $119,000, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. By 2024, that median price had risen to roughly $412,000, according to the National Association of Realtors. That's a gain of about $293,000, or roughly a 246% increase over 24 years. Sounds amazing, right? But if you'd put that same $119,000 into a total stock market index fund, at the S&P 500's actual historical returns over that same period including dividends reinvested, you'd be sitting on approximately $908,000. That's over twice the wealth generated, with zero tenants, zero maintenance calls, and zero property taxes coming out of your pocket along the way. So on raw numbers alone, stocks appear to win convincingly. But raw numbers don't tell the whole story, and that's where this gets really interesting. So if stocks have historically outperformed home price appreciation by such a wide margin, why do so many people swear that real estate made them wealthy? It's not because they're wrong, it's because of three powerful mechanisms that most people never think about. The first mechanism is forced leverage. When you buy a house with a mortgage, you're typically putting down 5 to 20% and borrowing the rest. That means if you put $30,000 down on a $300,000 home, and that home goes up just 10% to $330,000, you didn't make 10% on your money. You made $30,000 on a $30,000 investment. That's a 100% return on your actual cash invested. Leverage amplifies your gains. And while yes, you can use margin to leverage stock investments, almost nobody does it at 5-to-1 ratios the way a standard mortgage allows. And for good reason, because margin calls can wipe you out overnight. Professor of Finance Edward Glaser at Harvard has written extensively about how the mortgage system essentially functions as a government-subsidized leverage program for the middle class. And there's nothing else quite like it in personal finance. The second mechanism is forced savings. This is the one that behavioral economists get really excited about. Every single month when you make a mortgage payment, a portion of that goes toward paying down your principal. You are building equity whether you feel like it or not. Research by Brigitte Madrian and Dennis Shea, published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics in 2001, showed that the single most powerful predictor of whether someone saves for retirement is automatic enrollment. When savings happen automatically, people save. When they have to actively choose to save, most don't. Your mortgage is basically automatic enrollment for wealth building. Meanwhile, with stocks, you have to actively decide every single month to open your brokerage app and invest. And behavioral finance research from Shlomo Benartzi and Richard Thaler, the same Thaler who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2017, shows that people are remarkably bad at doing this consistently. They panic sell during downturns, they skip contributions when money feels tight, and they chase hot tips instead of staying the course. A famous Dalbar study from 2023 found that the average stock market investor earned just 6.81% per year over the prior 30 years, while the S&P 500 itself returned 10.13%. That gap of over 3% per year, entirely caused by bad behavior, is what Thaler and others call the behavior gap. Real estate doesn't have this problem as badly because you can't panic sell your house with 2 taps on your phone at 11:30 at night. The illiquidity of real estate is actually a feature, not a bug. The third mechanism is what I call the sweat equity multiplier. With stocks, there is literally nothing you can do to make Apple or Google more valuable. You're a passive passenger. But with real estate, you can renovate a kitchen for $15,000 and add $40,000 in value. You can convert a basement into a rental unit. You can negotiate a better purchase price. Research from the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard shows that homeowners spend an average of $9,400 per year on home improvements, and strategic renovations consistently return 60 to 80 cents on the dollar at minimum, with some projects like minor kitchen remodels returning over 75% according to Remodeling Magazine's annual cost versus value report. Active investors in real estate can genuinely outperform the averages in a way that stock investors almost never can. So the real answer to why people feel wealthier from real estate is that the system is designed to make you behave better with real estate than with stocks. Okay, so now the big question. What should you actually do with all of this? Let me walk through a practical framework that I think works for most people. Step 1. Your primary residence is not an investment. I need you to hear that. I know it feels like one, but your house is where you live. You can't sell a bedroom when you need cash. You're paying property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and interest on top of the purchase price. A study by economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York found that total homeownership costs, including maintenance, taxes, insurance, and opportunity cost of the down payment, often reduce the effective return on a primary residence to between 1% and 2% per year after inflation. So buy a home because you want stability and a place to live, not because you think it's your retirement plan. Step 2. If you're going to invest in real estate for wealth building, treat it like a business. That means rental properties where you've run the numbers, where the rent covers the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance with room to spare. The 1% rule is a good starting point. The monthly rent should be at least 1% of the purchase price. So a $200,000 property should rent for at least $2,000 a month. Many experienced real estate investors like Brandon Turner and David Green, who you may know from the Bigger Pockets community, recommend aiming for cash-on-cash returns of at least 8 to 12% on rental properties. That means if you invested $40,000 total, including the down payment and closing costs, you should be netting at least $3,200 to $4,800 per year in actual cash flow after all expenses. If the numbers don't work, don't force it just because someone on social media told you real estate always goes up. Step 3. For most people, the stock market should be your primary wealth building engine. Here's why. It requires almost no time, almost no expertise, and the returns are historically excellent if you just stay the course. If you invest $500 per month into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund starting at age 25, assuming the historical average return of 10% per year, you'd have over $3.1 million by age 65. $3.1 million from $500 a month. And you don't need to fix a toilet at 2 in the morning to get there. Vanguard's research shows that a simple 3-fund portfolio, a total U.S. stock market fund, a total international stock market fund, and a total bond market fund, has outperformed 80 to 90% of actively managed funds over 20-year periods. Step 4. The real wealth hack is combining both. This is what most wealthy families actually do, and research backs it up. A 2022 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that households in the top 10% of net worth typically hold about 33% of their wealth in real estate and about 40% in financial assets like stocks and bonds. They're not choosing one or the other, they're using both. Here's what that could look like for a regular person. You buy a modest home you can comfortably afford, keeping your total housing costs under 28% of your gross income, which is what most financial planners recommend. You max out your 401k match at work. That's free money. You invest consistently in index funds through a Roth IRA or taxable brokerage account. And then, when you have enough capital and knowledge, maybe you buy a rental property or two. The real estate gives you leverage, tax benefits, and a tangible asset. The stocks give you liquidity, diversification, and compounding without headaches. Together, they cover each other's weaknesses. Step 5. And this one is critical. Know your actual numbers. Most people dramatically underestimate the costs of real estate investing. Vacancies, repairs, property management, capital expenditures, insurance increases, property tax reassessments. These are real and they eat into your returns. A report from the National Apartment Association estimates that average operating expenses for rental properties run between 35 and 45% of gross rental income. On the stock side, keep your expense ratios below 0.1%. Funds like VTI or VOO charge around 0.03%. And never pay someone 1% of your portfolio annually to manage index funds you could buy yourself. 1% per year in fees over a 30-year investing career can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. According to analysis from the Securities and Exchange Commission's own investor education materials. All right, let's bring this all together. Here's what we covered today. On raw historical returns, stocks have generally outperformed real estate appreciation by a significant margin, roughly 10% versus 3 to 4% annually for home prices alone. But real estate has 3 hidden superpowers: forced leverage through mortgages, forced savings through monthly payments, and the ability to actively add value through improvements and management. The behavior gap is real. The average stock investor underperforms the market by over 3% per year because of emotional decision-making, while real estate's illiquidity actually protects most people from their worst instincts. And the practical answer, the one that actually builds wealth for regular people, is to use both. Let your primary residence be a home, not a speculation. Invest consistently in low-cost index funds as your core wealth-building strategy. And layer in rental real estate when the numbers work and you have the capital and knowledge to do it right. The people who build the most wealth aren't arguing about real estate versus stocks on the internet. They own both, and they let time do the heavy lifting. Here's what I want you to take away more than anything else today. The best investment strategy is the one you'll actually stick with for decades. If real estate gets you excited and keeps you disciplined, lean into it. If the simplicity of index funds means you'll actually invest every single month without fail, do that. The worst strategy, the one that guarantees you don't build wealth, is doing nothing while you wait for the perfect answer. Start now with whatever you have, wherever you are. That's how real wealth gets built. If this video helped you see the real estate versus stocks debate a little more clearly, smash that subscribe button. I'm Joe, and I'll see you in the next one.